You know what's interesting? The world keeps telling introverts they need to come out of their shell. But what if there is no shell? What if what everyone mistakes for hiding is actually something else entirely? Something most people never stop moving long enough to notice. I'm not here to tell you introverts are misunderstood geniuses, or that being quiet is some kind of superpower. That's rubbish. But there is something genuinely different happening in the way introverted minds process reality. And it's not what you've been told. It's not about being shy. It's not about fear. It's about how your brain decided to allocate its resources. And once you understand what's actually going on beneath the surface, you start to see why certain advantages emerge naturally. Advantages that look invisible until you know where to look. Let's start with something everyone experiences but few people think about. Attention. Not the kind you give to a video or a conversation, the kind your brain uses as currency. Every moment, your nervous system is making micro-decisions about what deserves processing power. Extroverts tend to spread that attention wide. They scan the room, pick up social cues, track multiple conversations, respond quickly. It's rapid, external, reactive. Introverts do the opposite. They narrow the beam. Not because they're overwhelmed, but because their brain finds more value in depth than breadth. When you focus on fewer inputs, something shifts. You start noticing patterns other people miss. The subtext in a conversation, the logical flaw in an argument, the emotional undertone someone tried to hide. It's not that you're smarter, it's that you're processing differently. And in a world that's drowning in noise, the ability to filter and focus is quietly becoming one of the most valuable cognitive skills you can have. Here's where it gets interesting. Most people think introverts are less social because they're anxious or uncomfortable. But that's not the full picture. There's a deeper mechanism at play, one rooted in something psychologists call reward sensitivity. Your brain doesn't light up the same way an extrovert's does in social situations. Not because something's wrong, but because your dopamine system is calibrated differently. You don't get the same neurological payoff from external stimulation. And here's the advantage, that makes you selective by design. You don't need to be around people to feel okay, which means when you do choose to engage, it's intentional. You're not filling voids, you're not performing. You're there because the interaction actually matters. That selectivity creates something rare, genuine presence. While others are managing their social anxiety by staying busy, you've already figured out that being alone isn't the problem. Being surrounded by the wrong people is. Let's talk about energy, but not in the vague, self-help way. I mean the actual psychological concept of where your energy comes from and where it goes. Extroverts recharge through action and interaction. They process by talking. They think out loud. Introverts do the reverse. You recharge in stillness. You process internally before you speak. Your energy flows inward first, then outward, if it needs to. This isn't a weakness, it's an architectural difference. And it comes with a hidden strength. Emotional regulation. Because you're used to sitting with your thoughts, you develop a tolerance for discomfort that others don't have. You don't need to immediately react, vent, or discharge tension. You can hold complexity. You can sit in ambiguity. That gives you a kind of psychological endurance, an ability to navigate uncertainty without panic. In moments of chaos, when everyone else is scrambling for reassurance or distraction, you're still standing. Not because you're tougher, but because your system was built for the long game, not the sprint. There's a term in psychology called the observer effect, the idea that simply watching something changes your relationship to it. Introverts live in a version of this constantly. You're watching yourself think. You're aware of your internal dialogue in a way that most people aren't. That sounds exhausting, and sometimes it is. But it also means you have access to a layer of self-awareness that operates almost automatically. You catch your biases. You notice when you're rationalizing. You see your emotions forming before they take over. And that gives you a kind of choice that others don't always have. The choice to respond rather than react. It's not about being more controlled or emotionless. It's about having a gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where intelligence lives. Not IQ, not knowledge, but the ability to pause, reflect, and choose. And you've been training that muscle your entire life without even realizing it. Here's what no one tells you. Introversion isn't about what you're missing. It's about what you're not wasting. You're not wasting energy on shallow connections. You're not wasting attention on distractions. You're not wasting cognitive resources on performing a version of yourself that isn't real. That's not avoidance. That's conservation. And in a culture that glorifies busyness, oversharing, and constant availability, conservation looks like weakness. But it's not. The advantage of being an introvert isn't that you're better. It's that you've already learned something most people spend decades trying to figure out. That your worth isn't determined by how much space you take up. That silence isn't empty, it's full. That being comfortable in your own mind is one of the rarest forms of freedom. And once you stop apologizing for it, once you stop trying to be louder or more visible or more like everyone else, something shifts. You stop measuring yourself by extroverted standards, and you start seeing your wiring for what it really is. Not a limitation, but a design. So no, you don't need to come out of your shell, because you were never hiding. You were just paying attention to something different. And in a world that's forgotten how to think quietly, that might be the sharpest tool you have. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to prove it. You just need to stop doubting it. Because the people who really matter, they'll notice. Not because you're loud, but because you're clear. If you're an introvert, hit that red button to understand your mind better.